The year is 1985. We are the world swept through America. Back to the Future popularized Marty McFly's coma-induced fever dream after he permanently destroyed his eardrums. Brighter colors were in for the women, suits were in for the men, and your dollar was worth 2.292 times more than it is today. But hidden by the blazing logo of popularity, an entire war was being waged between the common nerd and the local Christian establishment. To aid in the nerd's cause, Steve Jobs released the revolutionary Macintosh 128K. While in production, Steve Jobs reaffirmed his belief that the design would be successful, stating that the customers don't know what they want until we've shown them. It featured the perfect storm of features, like a mouse, a bigger screen than IBM, and the promise that using it would liberate you from your helicopter parents. However, the most prominent feature was the corners of its software tabs. They were round, something humans had been conditioned to love ever since Umbungulus the Hoe invented the wheel by repeatedly chucking boulders at his enemies. He was also seen chasing said boulders down the hill so that he could carry them back up to the top of the hill, and in doing so incidentally invented the sport of cheese rolling. The Macintosh 128K appealed to the common man and was extremely successful. Meanwhile, Bill Gates saw this and wanted to make sure that his position of power was not undermined, so he released Windows 1.0 in November of 1895. Included in the Windows 1.0 package was a software that changed the world of art forever. Welcome to Lab, where Lab does whatever he wants. Today in the lab, the MS Paint DTNAF. Created by Dan McCabe and originally known as Windows Paint, the software allowed for creation and manipulation of 1-bit monochrome picture files known as MSP. Even in its earliest form, Paint was so successful that it inspired ASCII art. To this day, masterpieces of this quality appear in Twitch chat and the occasional YouTube comment section. Paint even began to gain traction overseas, spreading the common man's computer to Europe, and before humanity knew it, 5 years had passed. 1990 was a big year. It started on a Monday. The Hubble telescope entered space. The Tower of Pisa was temporarily closed so that nobody noticed the UFO used to replace the building with its updated version. Home Alone single-handedly tripled the minimum wage of professional babysitters, and the internet was invented. The early concept for the internet was proposed by Vannevar Bush in his As We May Think, which then inspired Project Xandu, an online system in the 1960s. The next few years introduced a figure known as Tim Berners-Lee, who worked at CERN. He definitely did not receive information from the future and used a combination of various pre-existing technologies to create what he called the World Wide Web. It was one small step for CERN and one massive leap for nerdkind. Additionally, Windows released version 3.0, featuring an update called Paintbrush, which now had color and could save BMP and PCX files. Thanks to these additions, users of Windows created the foundations for modern art. In particular, Red Dot on Canvas drew large amounts of attention to the industry due to its controversial take on the Japanese flag. Time marched on, and after 5 years passed, another update to the Paint software launched. In those years, Nintendo had released the SNES. The color blue started to remind people of Sonic the Hedgehog more than it reminded them of the sky. The Beanie Baby craze created an entire demographic of moms that wanted to get their children into soccer, and in 1995, Neon Genesis Evangelion became a cult classic because it was too confusing to be understood by any gathering of less than 10,000 people. Then, Windows 95 introduced a new and improved Paint software. In addition to the provided set of colors, users could also create, save, and load their own palette of colors. However, this function was too overpowered and was removed just a few years later in 2001. Nevertheless, Paint could now operate on 16-bit and higher images and open and save in JPEG and GIF, with some filters. This unlocked nearly unlimited potential, allowing users to recreate the Mona Lisa and Starry Night. Some experts argue that this is also the historical catalyst for NFT blockchains. Some more versions of Windows were released over the next 5 years, but Paint remained largely the same. However, in those years, the music genre of Eurobeat hit Japanese TVs, and it even came with its own anime. M-theory was mistakenly coined after Edward Witt said, when asked if it would be a good idea to consolidate the different versions of string theory. Pathfinder landed on Mars, and the Illuminati almost took over the world during the U2 King movement. To counteract this, an entire year of time was skipped, so that George Bush would have the sufficient technology to defeat them. With that, the year was now 2001, and Microsoft decided it wanted to revitalize itself as being hip with the kids, and released an OS with an RPG leveling system known as Windows XP. It was extremely successful, and in what may be the largest ARG project in existence, hundreds of thousands of internet goers dedicated themselves to unlocking the secrets of this OS, all of them vying to be the first player to max out their level. A notable platform of this time was You're the Man Now Dog, a very popular grinding site for low-level players until it was power-crept by social media. Thanks to many genius pioneers, the internet gained access to Techno Viking, MySpace, 4chan, and Metroid Prime. On the 18th birthday of Paint, Mario Party 5 was unlocked. Memes also played a large part in the propaganda campaigns used during this time. The Windows XP Paint now used GDI+, which allowed for the saving of files without needing additional filters. Thanks to being newly streamlined, Paint entered its golden age, its design so simple that it could be understood by even a boomer. As such, thousands of internet dwellers were enabled to join the early meme world. The XP system was working extremely well, however some argue that it was working too well. Thanks to the dot-com boom, many consumers had started to come up with more original content than Microsoft itself, and so, in a rush, Bill Gates moved on to release the DLC to Windows XP by proclaiming that even the horizon was worth pursuing. He called it Windows Vista. The much-anticipated DLC entered beta testing in 2006 and opened itself to the public early in 2007. Unfortunately, it received poor reviews due to having lowered performance, and surviving sites of the dot-com boom exploding provided outside competition, the foremost among them being YouTube, Reddit, and Facebook. While this version of Windows did update Paint's default palette and a few quality-of-life features like tripling the undo button's memory and adding a crop function, it simply wasn't enough. Due to its diminishing player base, Microsoft decided to abandon Project XP to instead pursue marketing to the larger community of its average user and released Windows 7 in 2009. Microsoft Paint's golden era was over and it had largely been forgotten. Nevertheless, Paint was still updated to include text boxes, artistic brushes, and the 19-year-old technology of a ribbon. In 2012, Windows 8 launched, bringing with it the most important patch of all, the ability to scroll while zoomed. Unfortunately, the internet continued without Paint as it would for some time. In 2015, Windows 10 launched, but no new updates were announced until April 2017 when Microsoft released Paint 3D. A month later, Microsoft declared Paint a depreciated feature, thereby confirming that they intended to put it to rest. Much like the recent OnlyFans uproar, thousands of voices cried out that Windows simply wouldn't be the same without it. As of today, MS Paint remains most prominently as a tool for creating avant-garde artwork, like the anime opening Paint animations, slapping Gen Xers with nostalgia, and anti-speed painting. The last heard news for Paint is that the Windows 11 version has been rumored to include a dark mode.